When Dr. Marcus Holloway opened his front door at 2:47 in the morning to find a woman collapsed on his porch steps, barely conscious and clutching two newborn babies against her chest, he thought he was having a nightmare. Her lips were blue, her skin dangerously pale, and frost clung to her hair like a crown of ice. But it was the desperation in her eyes as she whispered, "Please, they can't find us," that made him realize this wasn't a dream. It was a life or death moment, and the next words out of his mouth would determine whether 3 people lived or died. By sunrise, his quiet suburban home would be surrounded by police cars, federal agents, and a revelation so shocking it would make national headlines. But in that frozen moment on his doorstep, all Marcus knew was that 3 lives hung in the balance, and he had exactly 5 seconds to make a choice that would change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dr. Marcus Holloway had been a physician for 23 years, and in all that time, he'd seen just about every kind of medical emergency imaginable. Heart attacks in grocery store aisles, car accident victims brought to the ER with injuries that defied belief, children with fevers so high they should have been fatal. He'd delivered babies in taxicabs, treated gunshot wounds in gang-infested neighborhoods, and once even performed an emergency tracheotomy in a restaurant using a ballpoint pen. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for what he found on his doorstep that bitter January night in Everett Springs, Colorado. Marcus had been asleep for maybe 3 hours when something woke him. Not a sound exactly, more like a feeling. That instinct every doctor develops after years of working night shifts. The 6th sense that tells you something is wrong, even before your conscious mind registers it. His wife, Elena, was beside him, breathing softly, her dark hair spread across the pillow. The digital clock on the nightstand read 2:47 a.m. Their German Shepherd mix, Charlie, who normally slept in the hallway, was nowhere to be seen. That was unusual. Charlie was a creature of habit, as reliable as the sunrise. Marcus sat up, listening. The house was silent, except for the furnace humming and the occasional creak of settling wood. Then he heard it, a soft thump from the front porch, followed by what sounded like labored breathing. His first thought was that someone had gotten drunk and stumbled onto the wrong property. It happened occasionally in their quiet neighborhood, especially on weekends. But this was a Tuesday night, and something about the sound made his medical training kick into high alert. That breathing pattern was wrong. Shallow, rapid, desperate. He pulled on his robe and slippers, careful not to wake Elena. She'd been having trouble sleeping lately, and he didn't want to disturb her over what was probably nothing. But as he made his way down the stairs, guided by the soft glow of nightlights, that feeling of wrongness intensified. Charlie was at the front door, not barking, but whining softly. His tail wasn't wagging. Instead, the dog was doing something Marcus had never seen before. He was pawing at the door urgently, then looking back at Marcus as if to say, "Hurry up, this is serious." Marcus flipped on the porch light and peered through the decorative glass panel beside the door. What he saw made his heart stop. A woman was collapsed on his front steps, halfway between standing and falling. Her winter coat was inadequate for the 15-degree weather, torn in places, with no gloves and no hat. But that wasn't what made Marcus's breath catch. It was the bundles she was clutching, 2 of them, wrapped in what looked like torn blankets and pressed against her chest. Babies. Marcus yanked the door open so fast it banged against the wall. The blast of cold air hit him like a physical force, and he could see his breath in silver clouds. The woman's eyes flickered open at the sound. They were grey-blue, red-rimmed from crying or cold or both, and filled with a terror so profound it made Marcus's chest tighten. "Please," she whispered, her lips barely moving. They were tinged with blue, a clear sign of hypothermia. "Please, they can't find us." Marcus didn't hesitate. Years of emergency medicine had taught him to act first and ask questions later. He reached down and carefully took one of the bundles from her arms. It was lighter than he expected. The blanket was damp and frozen in places. Through the thin fabric he could feel the tiny body of an infant, cold but moving, alive. "Elena!" Marcus shouted toward the stairs. "Elena, I need you now!" He helped the woman stand, supporting her weight as she wobbled. She wouldn't let go of the second baby, clutching it so tightly Marcus worried she might hurt the child. Her legs could barely support her, and when he got her inside, he could see the full extent of her condition under the hallway lights. She was probably in her late 20s, though it was hard to tell through the layers of grime and exhaustion. Her long brown hair was matted with ice crystals. Her jeans were torn at the knees, revealing skin that was an alarming shade of white-blue. Her hands, still clutching the baby, were covered in cuts and scratches, and when she tried to speak again, her teeth chattered so violently she couldn't form words. Elena appeared at the top of the stairs, tying her robe. "Marcus, what?" She stopped mid-sentence when she saw the scene in the hallway. To her credit, she didn't freeze or panic. Elena had been a nurse before they had their daughter, and her training kicked in immediately. "Hypothermia," Marcus said quickly. "2 infants. Charlie, move!" The dog reluctantly backed away from the woman, still whining. Together, Marcus and Elena guided the woman to the living room couch. Elena ran to get blankets while Marcus carefully unwrapped the bundle he was holding. What he saw made his medical assessment shift into overdrive. A baby girl, probably less than 48 hours old. Her umbilical cord stump was still fresh, crudely tied with what looked like a shoelace. She was small, maybe 5 pounds, and her skin had that dangerous pale tone that indicated severe cold exposure. But she was breathing. Her tiny chest rose and fell in quick, shallow movements. "Marcus!" Elena was back with an armful of blankets and towels. "What happened? Who is she?" "I don't know," Marcus said, wrapping the baby girl in a warm blanket and holding her against his chest. Body heat was crucial right now. "She just showed up on our doorstep." The woman on the couch was shaking violently now, a good sign, actually. It meant her body was still trying to warm itself. But she still wouldn't release the second baby. Her eyes darted between Marcus and Elena, filled with distrust and fear. "It's okay," Elena said softly, kneeling beside the couch. She'd always been better with frightened patients than Marcus. "We're doctors. We want to help you and your babies. Can you let me see the other one?" The woman's grip tightened for a moment. Then slowly, reluctantly, she loosened her arms. Elena carefully took the second bundle, unwrapping it with practiced efficiency. Another baby girl. This one was slightly larger, maybe 6 pounds, and her coloring was better than her sister's. Twins, Marcus realized. Fraternal twins based on their different sizes and features. "They're cold but alive," Elena said, relief evident in her voice. "We need to warm them gradually. Too fast and we could cause shock. Marcus, get the heating pads from the bathroom. And call—" "No!" The woman on the couch suddenly found her voice. It was hoarse, desperate. "No hospitals, no police. Please, you can't call anyone." Marcus and Elena exchanged a glance. "This was getting complicated fast, ma'am," Marcus said gently, still holding the smaller twin against his chest. "These babies need medical attention. They're severely underfed and hypothermic. And you—" "I know what I am," she interrupted, tears streaming down her face now. "I know we're in bad shape, but if you call the police, if you take us to a hospital, they'll find us. And if they find us, they'll take my babies and I'll never see them again. Or worse, who will find you?" Elena asked carefully. The woman's whole body was shaking now, whether from cold or fear or both, Marcus couldn't tell. "My husband," she whispered. "Ex-husband. I got away. But he has connections everywhere. Police, hospitals, social services. If my name goes into any system, he'll know. He'll come." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He'd seen this before. Domestic abuse victims who were terrified to seek help because their abusers had convinced them that no one was safe, that there was no escape. It was a special kind of evil. "Okay," he said, making a decision that probably violated a dozen protocols and reporting requirements. "No hospitals, no police, not yet. But you and these babies need help, and you need it now. Can you at least tell us your name?" The woman hesitated, then nodded slowly. Sarah Mitchell. And my babies, her voice broke. I haven't even named them yet. I gave birth 2 days ago in a gas station bathroom in Wyoming. I've been driving ever since. I ran out of gas 2 miles from here. I walked. I didn't know where else to go. I just saw your house lights and thought she couldn't finish. Elena squeezed Sarah's hand. You thought right. You're safe here. We're going to help you. Over the next hour, Marcus and Elena worked with the efficiency of a well-trained medical team. They gradually warmed Sarah and the twins using blankets, heating pads, and warm fluids. Marcus examined the babies while Elena tended to Sarah, treating her frostbite and the various cuts and bruises that covered her body. The twins were remarkably resilient. Despite being born in a gas station bathroom and spending 2 days in freezing temperatures with minimal care, they showed no signs of serious infection or injury. They were underweight and would need careful monitoring, but they were fighters. Sarah's story emerged in fragments as she warmed up and her shivering subsided. She'd been married to a man named Robert Mitchell, a successful real estate developer in Denver. To the outside world, they'd seemed like the perfect couple. Big house, expensive cars, all the trappings of success. But behind closed doors, Robert had been controlling, then violent, then terrifying. When Sarah discovered she was pregnant, she'd hoped it would change things. Instead, it got worse. Robert became obsessed with the idea of having a son to carry on his name. When the ultrasound revealed twins, both girls, his rage had been explosive. He said I was worthless, Sarah whispered, staring at her daughters sleeping in a nest of blankets on the couch. He said if I couldn't give him a son, he'd make sure I never saw these babies after they were born. He was going to take them the moment they were delivered and send me away. He had it all planned. A private birth, no hospital records, adopting them out to his cousin who couldn't have kids. I'd just disappear. Elena's face was pale with anger. Marcus felt his fists clench. So I ran, Sarah continued. I waited until he was at a business conference in Chicago. I took cash I'd been hiding for months. I drove north, thinking maybe Canada, maybe just anywhere he wouldn't think to look. But I went into labor early. I was only 37 weeks. I made it to that gas station before the contractions got too bad. A trucker's wife helped me. She was kind. But she wanted to call an ambulance and I couldn't let her. So after the babies were born, I left. I've been driving ever since, stopping only for gas and to feed them. But I ran out of everything. Money, gas, formula, luck. She looked up at Marcus with those haunted gray-blue eyes. I saw your porch light on. I saw the wreath on your door with the wooden sign that said, the Holloway family, and something about it made me think you might help. I don't even know why. I just knew if I didn't knock on a door soon, we'd all freeze to death in my car. Marcus sat down heavily in his recliner, still holding the smaller twin who'd fallen asleep against his chest. He looked at Elena, who was sitting beside Sarah, one arm around the exhausted young mother. They both knew they were in over their heads. This wasn't a simple case of someone needing medical help. This was a woman fleeing domestic violence with 2 newborns, no resources, and a dangerous man hunting for her. The right thing to do, legally, would be to call the police and let the proper authorities handle it. But Marcus had seen how those situations sometimes played out. Abusers with money and connections could manipulate systems. They could charm police officers, hire expensive lawyers, and make victims look unstable or dangerous. And Sarah's fear wasn't irrational. If Robert Mitchell had the resources she claimed, he very well might have people watching hospital admissions and police reports. Eleanor, Marcus said quietly, can I talk to you in the kitchen for a minute? They left Sarah dozing on the couch with her babies and stepped into the kitchen. Charlie followed them, still anxious and alert. What are we going to do? Elena whispered. We can't just keep her here. That man could show up. We could be charged with harboring a fugitive or interfering with custody rights or... She's not a fugitive, Marcus interrupted. She's a victim. And those babies were born to her. There are no custody rights until there's a custody case, which there can't be if she never filed for divorce or separation. You don't know that for sure. No, But I know she's terrified. I know those babies would have died if she hadn't found our house. And I know that if we call the police right now, before we have a plan, we might be signing their death warrant." Eleanor closed her eyes. "This is crazy, Marcus. We're not social workers or lawyers. We're just two people who happened to answer our door." "Exactly. We answered the door. Now we have to see this through." They stood in silence for a moment. Through the kitchen doorway, they could see Sarah sleeping fitfully on the couch, one hand resting protectively on her babies. "Okay," Elena finally said, "but we need help. Real help, legal help. We can't do this alone." Marcus nodded. "I know someone. Daniel Reeves. Remember him? He was 2 years ahead of me in med school, but he dropped out and went to law school instead. He specializes in domestic violence cases now. Works for a nonprofit in Denver. You think he'd help?" "I think," Marcus said slowly, "that he'd want to know why we're asking, but yes, if anyone can help Sarah disappear legally, or at least buy her enough time to get legal protection, it's Daniel." Elena pulled out her phone. "It's almost 5 a.m. He's not going to answer. Try anyway." She did. The phone rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. Elena left a brief, vague message, asking Daniel to call back as soon as possible about an urgent medical legal matter. Marcus looked out the kitchen window. The sky was starting to lighten at the edges, that deep blue-black giving way to navy. In a few hours, their daughter Amy would wake up and come downstairs expecting a normal Wednesday morning before school. Instead, she'd find a strange woman and 2 newborn babies sleeping in their living room. They'd have to explain. They'd have to make her understand the importance of secrecy. At 14, Amy was mature for her age, but this was asking a lot. "We'll tell her the truth," Eleanor said, reading his thoughts. "She deserves that. And she's good at keeping secrets when it matters. How long do you think we can keep Sarah here before someone notices?" Elena shrugged. "We live on a cul-de-sac. The neighbors mostly keep to themselves. If we're careful, maybe a few days. Long enough for your friend to help, hopefully." Back in the living room, Sarah stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a moment she looked panicked, unsure where she was. Then she saw her babies still sleeping peacefully beside her, and the tension eased slightly. "What time is it?" she asked hoarsely. "Almost 5, Marcus said, returning to his chair. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," she admitted. "But warmer. Thank you for everything, for not calling the police, for not turning us away. We're not out of the woods yet," Elena said gently. "We need to figure out next steps. You can't stay hidden forever, Sarah. Eventually you'll need legal protection, documentation for the babies, medical care." "I know," Sarah interrupted. "I know I can't run forever. I just needed time. Time to figure out how to keep them safe. Time to make sure Robert can't take them." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "He said he'd kill me before he let me keep them." And I believe him. Marcus felt that familiar anger rising again. He'd seen too many cases like this in the ER. Women with broken bones and creative excuses. Men with charm and connections who got away with monstrous behavior because they knew how to work the system. "We're going to help you," he said firmly. "I've contacted a lawyer friend who specializes in cases like yours. We're going to get you legal protection, and we're going to make sure you and your babies are safe. But Sarah, you have to trust us, and you have to be completely honest about everything. Can you do that?" Sarah looked from Marcus to Elena, searching their faces. Whatever she saw there must have reassured her, because she nodded slowly. "Yes, I'll tell you everything. Whatever it takes to keep them safe." As dawn broke over Everett Springs, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, the Holloway household was wide awake. Coffee brewing, babies fed with formula Elena had purchased from an all-night drugstore, and Sarah finally warm enough to stop shivering. Marcus stood at the window, watching the street wake up. Lights coming on in neighboring houses. People starting their cars to warm them up before their morning commutes. Everything looked normal, peaceful, safe, but he knew that somewhere out there a dangerous man was looking for the woman and baby sleeping in his living room. And when Robert Mitchell discovered where they were, which he eventually would, things were going to get complicated fast. The choice Marcus had made at 2:47 a.m. to open his door and bring these strangers inside, had set events in motion that couldn't be undone. 3 lives were now connected to his. 3 lives that he'd taken responsibility for the moment he'd said, "You're safe here." He just hoped that when the storm came, and it would come, he'd be strong enough to keep that promise. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Amy Holloway had always been able to tell when her parents were hiding something. It was a skill she'd developed over 14 years of being an observant, slightly too smart for her own good kid. The way her mom's voice got just a little too cheerful when she was stressed. The way her dad rubbed the back of his neck when he was worried. The way they exchanged those quick, silent glances that meant, "We'll talk about this later," when she's not listening. So when Amy came downstairs that Wednesday morning at 6:30, ready to complain about her algebra homework and beg for chocolate chip pancakes, she immediately knew something was very, very wrong. Her parents were sitting at the kitchen table, both already dressed, both looking like they hadn't slept. Her dad had that deep crease between his eyebrows that only appeared during serious situations. Her mom was gripping her coffee mug like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. And Charlie, who usually greeted Amy with enthusiastic tail wagging and demands for belly rubs, was lying by the living room doorway in what Amy called his guard dog position. "What happened?" Amy asked, dropping her backpack. "Is Grandma okay? Did something happen to Aunt Lisa?" "Everyone's fine," Elena said quickly. "But we need to talk to you about something important before you go to school." Amy felt her stomach drop. Those words never preceded anything good. She pulled out a chair and sat down, bracing herself. "Okay, what is it?" Marcus and Elena exchanged one of those looks. Then her dad spoke, his voice low and serious. "Early this morning, a woman came to our door. She was in trouble. She needed help. She had 2 newborn babies with her, and they were all suffering from hypothermia and exhaustion." Amy's eyes widened. "Oh my God, are they okay? Did you call an ambulance?" "They're stable now," Elena said. "But no, we didn't call an ambulance." And that's where this gets complicated. Over the next 15 minutes, her parents explained the situation in terms they thought Amy would understand. A woman running from an abusive husband, twin babies born in dangerous circumstances, the need for secrecy and safety, the legal complications, the risks involved. What they didn't expect was Amy's immediate and intense reaction. "She's here," Amy whispered, glancing toward the living room. "The woman and the babies. They're here right now?" "Yes," Marcus confirmed. "She's sleeping on the couch with the twins." "Amy, this is serious. You cannot tell anyone about this. Not your friends, not your teachers, not anyone online. Do you understand?" "Can I see them?" Elena blinked. "Amy, did you hear what we just said about—" "I heard everything," Amy interrupted. "I get it. Secret, dangerous guy looking for her. Can't tell anyone. But can I see the babies?" Marcus sighed, but there was a hint of a smile. This was so typically Amy. Process the crisis quickly, then immediately want to help. "Come on, but be quiet." She finally fell asleep about an hour ago. Amy followed her parents into the living room, Charlie trailing behind. What she saw made her heart clench in a way she hadn't expected. The woman on their couch looked younger than Amy had imagined, maybe late 20s, but exhaustion and fear had carved lines around her eyes that made her seem older. Her brown hair was clean now. Someone had helped her shower, probably, but it was tangled and damp. She was curled on her side, and nestled against her chest in a nest of blankets were 2 tiny babies, so small they barely looked real. "They're so little," Amy breathed. "Born 2 days ago," Elena said softly. "Premature by a few weeks, but strong. They're fighters." Amy knelt beside the couch, carefully not touching anything but needing to see better. The babies were identical at first glance, but Amy noticed the small differences. One had slightly darker hair. The other had a tiny birthmark on her left cheek. They were both sleeping with that peaceful, complete trust that only babies had. "What are their names?" "They don't have names yet," Marcus said. "Sarah hasn't named them." "That's so sad," Amy whispered. Then looking up at her parents, "We're going to help them, right? We're going to make sure that guy doesn't find them." "We're going to try," Marcus said carefully. "But Amy, this could get dangerous. If this man is as connected as Sarah says, and if he finds out we're hiding her here, then we're already involved anyway." Amy interrupted with a logic that made Eleanor wince because it was true. "So we might as well help her all the way, right?" Marcus squeezed his daughter's shoulder. "When did you get so grown up?" "I've been training under two of the smartest people I know," Amy said with a small smile. "You taught me that we help people who need it, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Sarah stirred at the sound of voices. Her eyes opened, immediate panic flashing across her face until she registered where she was. Then she saw Amy kneeling beside the couch and instinctively pulled the babies closer. "It's okay," Eleanor said quickly. "This is our daughter, Amy. We told her about the situation. She understands the need for secrecy." Sarah studied Amy for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, tears filled her eyes. "You're letting your daughter near us? After everything I told you? The danger?" "You're not the danger," Amy said firmly. "That jerk who hurt you is. And we don't let bullies win in this house." Something in Sarah's expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but a softening. "How old are you?" 14. "Almost 15. I have a brother who's 15, Sarah said quietly. "He doesn't know about any of this. Robert wouldn't let me talk to my family. Said they were bad influences." Her voice broke. "I haven't spoken to my brother in 3 years." Amy felt anger surge through her, hot and righteous. She'd read about people like this in her social studies class when they covered domestic violence awareness. She'd even done a presentation on it. But reading statistics and seeing an actual victim were completely different things. "We're going to help you," Amy said with the absolute certainty only a 14-year-old could have. "I don't know how yet, but we will." Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and his expression shifted when he saw the caller ID. "It's Daniel. I need to take this." He stepped into the kitchen, and Amy could hear the low murmur of conversation. Elena started gathering the empty formula bottles and dirty blankets. "Amy, you need to get ready for school. Can't I stay home?" "I could help." "No," Elena said firmly. "Everything needs to look normal. That means you go to school, you act completely ordinary, and you don't give anyone any reason to ask questions. But what if someone from school sees Sarah's car?" "She said she abandoned it 2 miles from here." Elena paused. "That was a good point. Where exactly did you leave your car?" She asked Sarah. "Near the old Riverside Park entrance," Sarah said, shifting one of the babies to her shoulder for burping. "It's a blue Honda Civic, Wyoming plates. Out of gas, and probably looking abandoned by now. Someone's going to report it," Amy said. "And if the police run the plates, then they'll trace it back to Sarah's name, and potentially to Robert," Marcus finished, returning from the kitchen. Daniel agrees. "We need to move the car before someone calls it in. He's driving up from Denver right now. Should be here by 10. "I can't drive the car," Sarah said, panic creeping into her voice. "I can barely walk, and I can't leave the babies." "You're not going anywhere," Elena assured her. "Marcus will take care of the car." "I'll help," Amy volunteered. "Absolutely not," both parents said in unison. "You're going to school," Elena continued. "Your dad will handle the car situation with Daniel when he gets here." Amy wanted to argue, but she recognized that tone. This wasn't up for debate. "Fine, but text me updates. And if anything happens, we'll let you know," Marcus promised. "Now go get ready. You've got 20 minutes before you need to catch the bus." Amy reluctantly headed upstairs, but not before giving Sarah one last encouraging look. "It's going to be okay. My parents are like superhero doctors. They save people all the time." After Amy left, Sarah looked at Marcus and Elena with wonder. "She's remarkable. You raised her well." "She's her mother's daughter," Marcus said, earning a gentle elbow from Eleanor. "Stubborn, compassionate, and way too smart for her own good." The morning unfolded with careful choreography. Amy left for school, acting as normal as possible, though Marcus caught her glancing back at the house multiple times before the bus arrived. Elena called in sick to the clinic where she worked part-time, claiming a stomach bug. Marcus had already cleared his schedule for the day. Having told his office he was dealing with a family emergency. Which wasn't technically a lie. Sarah fed the babies, changed them with supplies Elena had quietly purchased the night before, and tried not to fall apart every time she heard a car drive past the house. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow seemed like a threat. Marcus could see the toll 3 years of abuse and 2 days of running had taken on her. She was running on fumes and terror. At 9:47 a.m., a silver Toyota Camry pulled into the Holloway driveway. Marcus watched from the window as Daniel Reeves emerged, looking much the same as he had in medical school, just with more grey in his hair and deeper lines around his eyes. Daniel carried a leather briefcase and wore jeans and a casual jacket, not his usual court attire, which Marcus appreciated. The last thing they needed was someone looking obviously lawyer-like showing up. Marcus opened the door before Daniel could knock. "Thanks for coming. Your message made it sound urgent," Daniel said, stepping inside. "What's going on, Marcus? You sounded really cryptic on the phone." Marcus led him to the living room, where Sarah was sitting with the twins. Daniel stopped in his tracks, his lawyer brain clearly already piecing together the situation. "Mr. Reeves," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "I'm Sarah Mitchell. I need help." For the next hour, Sarah told her story in full detail this time. Not just the broad strokes she'd shared with the Holloways, but the specifics. How Robert had isolated her from family and friends gradually, so subtly she hadn't noticed until it was too late. How the emotional abuse had escalated to physical violence. How he'd threatened to kill her if she ever tried to leave. How he'd used his money and connections to make her feel like no one would believe her. That she had no options, no escape. She described the planned forced adoption, the way Robert had already picked out the family who would raise the twins. The way he'd talked about getting rid of Sarah afterward, as casually as someone discussing taking out the trash. She showed Daniel the bruises that were still healing on her arms and ribs, the burn mark on her shoulder from a cigar, the cut on her forehead from being shoved into a marble countertop. Daniel took notes, his expression growing darker with each revelation. Elena had to leave the room twice, overcome with emotion. Marcus sat rigid in his chair, his medical detachment barely keeping his rage in check. "I need to ask you something important," Daniel said when Sarah finished. "Did you ever file police reports? Get a protective order? Tell anyone what was happening?" Sarah shook her head miserably. "He said if I went to the police, he'd use his connections to make me look crazy. He'd say I was an unfit mother, that I had drug problems, that I was violent. He had evidence too, fake evidence. Medical records he'd somehow gotten altered. Photos that made it look like I was the abuser. He showed them to me once, just to prove he could destroy me any time he wanted." Daniel's jaw clenched. "How did you get away?" "He had a conference in Chicago. I knew it was my only chance. I took the cash I'd been hiding, grabbed the few documents I could find, my birth certificate, the fake medical records, anything that might be useful, and I left. I didn't even pack a bag. I just got in my car and drove. Then I went into labor and everything became about just surviving until these two were safely born." "The car," Marcus interjected. "We need to deal with it before someone reports it." Daniel nodded. "Where is it?" After getting the location, Daniel made a decision. "I'll drive it to a secure location. A friend of mine runs a domestic violence shelter an hour from here. They have a private lot. The car can stay there until we figure out next steps. That way, if Robert does trace it, it leads to a shelter, which won't tell him anything useful." "What are our legal options?" Elena asked. Daniel pulled out a legal pad from his briefcase. "Several, but none of them simple. First priority is getting an emergency protective order. I can file that today with a judge I trust. But Sarah, you need to understand that the moment we file any legal paperwork, your location becomes potentially discoverable. If Robert has the connections you say he does, Sarah interrupted. He golfs with judges. His best friend is a state senator. His lawyer is one of the most expensive in Denver. Then we need to be smart, Daniel said. We file in a different jurisdiction, not Denver. We use a judge who has a reputation for taking domestic violence cases seriously and who can't be easily influenced. We also need to document everything. Those fake medical records? I need copies. Any texts, emails, photos? I need them. We're going to build a case so airtight that even Robert's connections won't be able to punch through. But where do I go? Sarah asked, her voice small. I can't stay here. It's not fair to the Holloways, and it puts them in danger. Actually, Daniel said carefully, staying here might be your safest option, at least for a few more days. Robert doesn't know the Holloways. There's no connection between you and them. As long as no one sees you and your car is moved, this is the last place he'd think to look. By the time we file the protective order and get you into a secure shelter, you'll have legal protection. A few days, Marcus confirmed, looking at Elena, who nodded. We can do a few days. Sarah looked at them with tears streaming down her face. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. Marcus thought about that question. It was a fair one. 24 hours ago, Sarah Mitchell hadn't existed in his world. Now she and her babies were sleeping in his living room, and he was conspiring with a lawyer to hide her from a dangerous man. It was risky, possibly illegal, definitely complicated. But when he looked at those tiny babies sleeping peacefully, unaware of the danger they'd been born into, he knew exactly why. Because it's the right thing to do, he said simply. And because if I'd turned you away last night, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. Daniel left an hour later with copies of Sarah's documents and the keys to her car. The plan was simple. Move the car, file the emergency paperwork with a trusted judge, and start building the legal case that would keep Sarah and her babies safe. After he left, the house settled into a strange new rhythm. Sarah napped while the babies slept. Elena caught up on household tasks while keeping an ear out for the twins. Marcus made phone calls, reaching out to contacts at child services agencies he trusted, people who might be able to help navigate the system without alerting Robert. At 3:15 p.m., Amy burst through the front door, home from school and immediately heading for the living room. How are they? What happened? Did the lawyer come? Everything's fine, Elena said, intercepting her before she could wake Sarah. The lawyer came. We have a plan. And Sarah and the babies are safe for now. For now, Amy repeated, latching onto those words. But not forever. One step at a time, sweetheart, Marcus said. That night they all ate dinner together in the living room, an impromptu picnic on the floor, so Sarah wouldn't have to leave the babies. Amy chatted about her day at school, carefully editing out anything that might be too cheerful or normal-sounding, given the circumstances. Sarah listened with a wistful expression, like she was watching a life she'd once dreamed of having. As Amy helped her mom clean up the dishes, she whispered, Do you think her husband will find her? Elena paused, dish towel in hand. I don't know, honey. I hope not. But if he does, we'll handle it. You promise? Elena pulled her daughter into a hug. I promise we'll do everything we can to keep them safe. In the living room, Marcus sat in his recliner, watching Sarah gently rock one of the twins who'd woken up fussy. Charlie was curled up at her feet, having apparently decided Sarah was part of the pack now and deserved his protection. You should name them, Marcus said quietly. They're 2 days old. They deserve names. Sarah looked down at the baby in her arms. I was afraid to name them. Like if I gave them names, it would make them more real, more mine. And Robert would find a way to take that away too. He's not here, Marcus said gently. You are. They're yours. Name them. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, tears silently rolling down her cheeks. Then she smiled, a real smile, the first Marcus had seen. Lily, she whispered. This one is Lily. And her sister, she glanced at the other twin sleeping in the bassinet Elena had borrowed from a neighbor. She's Rose, Lily and Rose Mitchell. Beautiful names, Marcus said. My grandmother's garden, Sarah explained. She had lilies and roses. She died when I was 12, but I spent every summer with her until then. Those were the happiest times of my life, before Robert, before everything went wrong. Things are going to get better, Marcus said, hoping it was true. You took the hardest step already. You left. You protected your daughters. Everything from here is just details. But even as he said it, Marcus felt a nagging worry in his gut. Men like Robert Mitchell didn't give up easily. And when they discovered their control had slipped, they became most dangerous. Somewhere out in the world, a clock was ticking, and Marcus knew that sooner or later they'd run out of time. Daniel Reeves called at 7:42 a.m. on Thursday morning, just as Marcus was pouring his second cup of coffee. The lawyer's voice was tight, with controlled urgency, the tone Marcus had heard countless times in emergency rooms right before someone delivered bad news. "We have a problem," Daniel said without preamble. "Robert Mitchell filed a missing persons report yesterday afternoon. He's claiming Sarah suffered a mental breakdown after giving birth and fled with the babies. He's got a psychiatrist backing up claims of postpartum psychosis. Marcus, he's painting her as dangerous." Marcus felt his grip tighten on the phone. Through the kitchen doorway, he could see Sarah in the living room, peacefully feeding Lily while Rose slept beside her. She looked exhausted but calm, certainly not psychotic. "That's a lie." "Of course it's a lie. But it's a strategic one. He's already got the story placed with local news in Denver. Concerned father desperate to find missing wife and newborn twins. He's playing the victim, and he's doing it publicly. What does this mean for Sarah?" "It means we need to move faster than I'd hoped," Daniel said. "I've got the emergency protective order drafted, but we need Sarah's testimony on record before Robert's narrative becomes the accepted truth. Can you bring her to my office today? There's a judge who owes me a favor." "We can do an emergency hearing this afternoon." Marcus glanced back at Sarah. She'd barely slept in 3 days. The babies needed constant care. The idea of dragging her to Denver seemed cruel. "Is there any other way?" "Not if we want to beat him to the punch. Marcus, once his story takes root, every law enforcement agency in the region will be looking for Sarah as a potential danger to those babies. We need to get ahead of this now, or we lose any chance of controlling the narrative. I'll talk to her. Call you back in 30 minutes. Marcus ended the call and walked into the living room. Elena was already there, having heard enough of the conversation to understand something was wrong. Amy sat on the stairs, supposedly getting ready for school, but clearly listening. "What's happened?" Sarah asked, reading Marcus's expression. He told her about Robert's missing persons report, the claims of mental illness, the media coverage. With each word, he watched Sarah's face drain of color. By the time he finished, she was shaking. "He's doing exactly what he said he would," she whispered, "making me look crazy, making everyone think I'm the danger." She looked down at Lily in her arms, then at Rose sleeping peacefully. "What if they take my babies away? What if the police find me and arrest me and I never see them again?" "That's not going to happen," Elena said firmly, sitting beside her. "But we need to fight back. Today, Daniel can get you in front of a judge who will listen to your side." "I can't go to Denver," Sarah said, panic rising in her voice. "Robert will see me. He has people everywhere. The moment I show up at a courthouse—" "Not the main courthouse," Marcus interrupted. "Daniel works with judges who handle domestic violence cases in secure facilities, locations that aren't publicized. You'd be safe. But the babies—" "We'll take care of them," Eleanor said. "Marcus will drive you to Denver. Amy and I will stay here with Lily and Rose. You'll be gone maybe 4 hours, and when you come back you'll have legal protection." Sarah looked between them, terror and desperation warring on her face. "You'd take care of my babies? You'd let me leave them with you?" "Sarah," Marcus said gently, "we've been taking care of all 3 of you for 2 days now. A few more hours won't make a difference, except this time you'll come back with a judge's order protecting you." It took another 20 minutes of gentle persuasion, but Sarah finally agreed. By 9:15 a.m., Marcus was loading Sarah into his SUV, while Elena gave her detailed instructions on how to reach them if the babies needed anything. Amy had already left for school, but not before making Sarah promise to text updates. The drive to Denver took 90 minutes through increasingly urban landscape. Sarah spent most of it staring out the window, her hands twisting anxiously in her lap. Marcus tried to make conversation a few times, but eventually settled for comfortable silence, letting the radio fill the space with news and music. They were 20 minutes outside Denver when Sarah suddenly spoke. "I never thanked you properly." Marcus glanced at her. "For what?" "For not hesitating. When I showed up at your door, half frozen with 2 babies, you could have called the police immediately. You could have turned us away, but you didn't even hesitate. You just helped." "Elena deserves most of the credit," Marcus said. "She's always been better at the compassion part. I just provide the medical expertise." "You're being modest," Sarah said with a small smile. "Amy told me stories yesterday about how you once treated a homeless man in your living room because he was too afraid to go to the hospital. How you volunteer at free clinics on your days off. How you taught Amy that helping people isn't optional. It's who we're supposed to be." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Amy talks too much. She loves you. Both of you. It's obvious." Sarah looked down at her hands. "I used to have that, before Robert. My family was close. My dad was a high school teacher. My mom ran a bakery. We didn't have much money, but we were happy. Then I met Robert at a charity gala where I was waitressing to pay for college. He was charming, successful, generous. He swept me off my feet. By the time I realized what he really was, I was already trapped. How long were you married?" 3 years. But it felt like 30. She paused. "Do you know what the worst part was? It wasn't the hitting or the insults or even the threats. It was how he made me believe I deserved it, that I was worthless without him, that no one else would ever want me. He was so good at it that even now, even after everything, there's a part of me that wonders if he was right." Marcus pulled into a gas station parking lot and turned to face her fully. "Sarah, look at me." When she did, he continued, "You escaped from a man who had money, connections, and every advantage. You gave birth alone in a gas station bathroom and kept 2 premature babies alive for 2 days while running for your lives. You walked 2 miles in 15-degree weather to find help. That's not worthless. That's extraordinary." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. "I'm so scared. What if the judge doesn't believe me? What if Robert's already gotten to them? What if... Then we find another judge, another lawyer, another state if we have to. But Sarah, you're not going back to him. I promise you that. Even if we have to keep you hidden in our house for a year, you're not going back." Sarah wiped her eyes and nodded. "Okay, let's do this." Daniel's office was in a renovated warehouse in a quieter part of Denver, far from the main courthouse and business district. The building looked nondescript from the outside, exactly the kind of place someone could come and go without attracting attention. Inside, it was warm and professional, with photographs of families on the walls, all presumably clients Daniel had helped. Daniel met them in the lobby, carrying a thick folder of documents. "Sarah, good to see you again. How are the babies?" "They're with Elena," Sarah said. "She's wonderful with them." "Good, we don't have much time." Judge Patricia Chen agreed to see us at noon at a secure facility about 15 minutes from here. She's one of the best in the state for domestic violence cases. She's also a mother herself, which helps. "But Sarah, you need to understand something important." He looked at her seriously. "Judge Chen doesn't suffer liars or exaggerators. She's seen too many people manipulate the system. So when she asks you questions, you tell her the absolute truth. Every detail, no matter how painful or embarrassing. Can you do that?" Sarah nodded. Yes, for the next hour, Daniel prepared Sarah for what to expect. The questions the judge might ask, the evidence they'd present, including the fake medical records Robert had shown Sarah and photos she'd taken of her injuries over the years, stored on a hidden email account. The testimony she'd need to give about specific incidents of abuse. Marcus sat in the corner, listening and occasionally providing medical context when Daniel asked about injuries Sarah had sustained. It was brutal hearing the details. The broken ribs Robert had explained away as a fall downstairs. The concussion that had left Sarah unconscious for 4 hours. The cigarette burns carefully placed where clothing would cover them. By the time they left for the secure facility, Marcus felt physically ill. How had this man gotten away with this for so long? How had no one noticed or intervened? The secure facility turned out to be an unmarked building behind a community center, accessed through a side entrance that required a code. Judge Chen was already there, a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She wore business attire, but had the no-nonsense air of someone who'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by theatrics. "Ms. Mitchell," she said, shaking Sarah's hand. "I've reviewed Mr. Reeves's preliminary filing. I understand you're in a difficult situation. Let's talk." The hearing lasted 2 hours. Judge Chen asked detailed, sometimes brutally direct questions. Sarah answered each one, her voice shaking at times, but never wavering from the truth. She described the abuse, the escalation, the threats, Robert's plan to take the babies. She showed the fake medical records Robert had created and explained how he'd used them to keep her compliant. Marcus provided medical testimony about Sarah's condition when she'd arrived at his door, the state of the babies, and his professional opinion that Sarah showed no signs of mental illness or instability. Daniel presented evidence of Robert's wealth and connections, arguing that Sarah needed protection not just from physical violence, but from legal and financial manipulation. Judge Chen listened to everything, taking notes, occasionally asking follow-up questions. Her expression gave nothing away. When they finished, she was silent for a long moment, reviewing her notes. Finally, she looked up. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm going to grant an emergency protective order effective immediately. Mr. Mitchell is prohibited from contacting you or coming within 500 feet of you or your children. I'm also ordering temporary full custody of the twins to you pending a more complete hearing," Sarah gasped, fresh tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. Thank you so much. However," Judge Chen continued, her voice stern, "this is only temporary. Mr. Mitchell will be served with these papers, and he will challenge them. He'll bring his own lawyers and doctors and try to overturn my order. You need to be prepared for that fight, Ms. Mitchell. This is just the beginning." "I understand," Sarah said, "but it's a beginning. That's more than I had 2 days ago." Judge Chen's expression softened slightly. "You did the right thing getting out. Too many women don't. Mr. Reeves, I'm scheduling a full hearing for next week. Make sure your client is somewhere safe until then. I don't trust men like Robert Mitchell to respect protective orders, no matter what they say in court. She will be." "Your Honor," Daniel assured her. They left the facility with copies of the protective order and a sense of cautious victory. In the car, Sarah clutched the papers like they were made of gold. "This is real, right? He really can't come near us now?" "It's real," Marcus confirmed. "It's a legal document. If he violates it, he can be arrested." "But Judge Chen was right," Sarah said quietly. "He's going to fight this. He's going to use every resource he has to overturn it." "Let him try," Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. "You've got legal protection now. That changes everything." They were halfway back to Everett Springs when Marcus's phone rang. Elena's name flashed on the screen. He answered on Bluetooth. "Hey, how are the babies?" "The babies are fine," Elena said, but her voice was tight. "Marcus, we have a bigger problem. A reporter showed up at the house 20 minutes ago." Marcus felt his heart drop. "What?" She said she was following up on the missing persons case. Said she'd gotten a tip that a woman matching Sarah's description had been seen in our neighborhood. "Marcus, I told her we hadn't seen anyone, but I don't think she believed me. She took pictures of the house before she left." Sarah had gone pale. "He knows. Robert knows we're here?" "We don't know that for sure," Marcus said, but his mind was racing. "Elena, lock all the doors. Don't open them for anyone. We'll be home in 40 minutes. What do we do?" Sarah asked, panic creeping into her voice. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter. They had a protective order now, which was something. But if Robert had somehow tracked Sarah to Everett Springs, if he knew she was at the Holloway house, then that piece of paper might not be enough to keep them safe. "We stick to the plan," Marcus said firmly. "We get you and the babies somewhere secure, and we let the law do its job." But even as he said it, Marcus knew they were in deeper than he'd anticipated. Robert Mitchell wasn't going to simply accept defeat. Men like him never did. And the real battle was just beginning. As they drove through the darkening afternoon, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every car that passed seemed suspicious. Every vehicle that followed them for more than a few blocks made his heart race. Sarah noticed too, her eyes constantly checking the mirrors, her body tensed for flight. By the time they pulled into the Holloway driveway, the sun was setting. The house looked normal, peaceful even. But Marcus knew that peace was an illusion. Somewhere out there, Robert Mitchell was planning his next move, and they needed to be ready. The black Mercedes pulled up to the Riverside Park entrance at exactly 6:47 p.m. on Thursday evening, parking in the same spot where Sarah's abandoned Honda Civic had been found earlier that day. Robert Mitchell stepped out, his expensive Italian shoes crunching on the gravel. He was exactly what you'd expect from a successful real estate developer. Tall, handsome in a practiced way, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. But his eyes, cold and calculating, betrayed the rage simmering beneath his polished exterior. Sheriff Tom Brooks stood beside his patrol car, arms crossed, watching Robert with the wariness of a man who'd dealt with wealthy, entitled people his entire career in law enforcement. "Mr. Mitchell, I got your message, though I'm not sure why you needed to drive up here personally. My deputies are already investigating." Robert smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sheriff, when your wife disappears with your newborn daughters, you don't sit at home waiting for phone calls. You take action." He gestured toward the empty parking space where Sarah's car had been. "Your deputy said you found the vehicle here this morning?" "That's correct. Abandoned, out of gas, Wyoming plates matching the registration you provided. We had it towed to our impound lot, and you searched the area thoroughly. No sign of your wife or the babies. No footprints, no belongings, nothing to indicate which direction she went." Brooks paused. "Though I have to say, Mr. Mitchell, I'm curious why a woman would drive all the way from Denver to a small town in Colorado if she was having a mental health crisis." Robert's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Sarah's not well, Sheriff. She's been struggling since the pregnancy. Postpartum psychosis is unpredictable. People in that state don't think logically. They run." He pulled out his phone, showing Brooks what appeared to be medical documents. "Her psychiatrist has documented concerning behavior. Paranoid delusions, erratic mood swings. We were planning to get her help after the babies were born, but she fled before we could." Brooks scrolled through the documents, his expression neutral. 28 years in law enforcement had taught him that expensive documents didn't always equal truth. "These say she was a danger to herself and others." "That's what concerns me most," Robert said, injecting just the right amount of fear into his voice. "She's got 2 premature babies, Sheriff. She gave birth less than a week ago. She's not in her right mind, and she's out there somewhere with my daughters. Every hour that passes," he let the implication hang in the air. "We've issued an alert to all neighboring counties," Brooks said. "If she's in the area, we'll find her." "I appreciate that. But I'd like to do more. I've brought a private investigator with me." Robert gestured toward a second vehicle that had just pulled up. A dark SUV. A man emerged, mid-40s, built like someone who'd spent time in the military, with the kind of eyes that missed nothing. "This is Marcus Webb, former FBI. He specializes in finding missing persons." Brooks felt his instincts prickle. "Mr. Mitchell, I understand you're worried, but bringing in private security to a small town isn't against any laws," Robert finished smoothly. "Marcus will coordinate with your department, of course, but he has resources and connections that might help locate Sarah faster. Isn't that what we all want?" Brooks couldn't argue with that logic, even though something about the whole situation felt wrong. He'd learned to trust his gut over the years, and right now his gut was telling him that Robert Mitchell's concerned husband act was exactly that, an act. But without evidence, what could he do? Fine, Brooks said finally. But I want regular updates on anything you find. This is still my jurisdiction, and I won't have vigilante justice in my town. Of course, Sheriff. I just want my family back safe. Robert extended his hand. Brooks shook it, noting how cold Robert's palm was, despite the man's warm smile. After Brooks drove away, Robert's pleasant expression evaporated. He turned to Webb, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. I want her found, tonight. Use whatever resources you need. Check every house, every hotel, every shelter within 50 miles. Webb nodded, pulling out a tablet. I've already started. Cross-referenced her credit cards, though she hasn't used any since Denver. No cell phone activity, which means she ditched her phone or it died. But people don't disappear completely. She's on foot with 2 infants. Someone's seen them. The reporter I sent sniffed around earlier today. Said there was something off about one of the houses on Maple Street. Family claimed they hadn't seen anyone, but she got a strange vibe. Doctor and his wife, 1 teenage daughter. The Holloways, Webb confirmed, tapping his screen. Dr. Marcus Holloway, 46, physician. Elena Holloway, 44, part-time nurse. Daughter Amy, 14, clean records, no connections to Sarah that I can find. He looked up. Could be nothing, or it could be everything, Robert said. The car was abandoned 2 miles from that neighborhood. Sarah's desperate, freezing with 2 babies. She'd need shelter fast. Her doctor's house would make sense. You want me to check it out? Carefully. If she's there, I don't want her spooked into running again. Just confirm it. Get evidence, then we'll handle it properly through legal channels. Robert's smile was predatory. I've already filed for emergency custody based on Sarah's mental state. Once we prove she's hiding my children with strangers, no judge will side with her. Webb studied Robert for a moment. He'd worked for men like this before, men who paid well and didn't ask questions as long as results were delivered. He knew this wasn't really about concerned fatherhood, but that wasn't his problem. His problem was earning his fee. I'll have confirmation by morning, Webb said. Make it sooner. Back at the Holloway house, the mood was tense. Marcus had returned with Sarah to find Eleanor pacing the living room, while Amy kept watch at the window. The babies were awake and fussy, sensing the anxiety in the air, the way infants sometimes do. Tell me exactly what the reporter said, Marcus asked, taking Lily from Elena's arms to calm her. She claimed she was following up on a story about a missing woman with twins, Elena explained. She had a photo, said it matched a tip she'd received about someone in our neighborhood. I told her we hadn't seen anyone matching that description. But Marcus, she looked at me like she knew I was lying. She took pictures of our house, our cars, everything. Did she try to come inside? No, but she stood on the sidewalk for a good 5 minutes just looking. Charlie was going crazy barking at her. She finally left, but she said she'd be back if she learned anything new. Sarah was sitting on the couch holding Rose, her face pale. This is my fault. I've put you all in danger. I should leave, take the babies, and go where? Marcus interrupted gently. Sarah, you have a protective order now. You're legally protected. Running again would only make things worse. He's right. Daniel's voice came through the speakerphone Marcus had set up. The lawyer had been listening to the whole discussion from his Denver office. Sarah, if you run now, especially with that protective order in place, it could be used against you. Robert's team could claim you're unstable, that you're putting the babies at risk by constantly fleeing. You need to stay put and trust the legal system. But what if Robert shows up here? Amy asked from the window. What if he tries to take the babies? He can't, Daniel said firmly. Not legally. He's been served with the protective order. If he comes within 500 feet of Sarah or those babies, he's in violation and can be arrested. That's not a suggestion, that's the law. Robert doesn't care about laws, Sarah said quietly. He cares about winning. And he always wins. The words hung in the air, heavy with fear and history. Marcus looked around at his family, at Sarah and the babies they'd taken in, and felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He'd made a choice that night to help 3 strangers. Now he had to see it through, whatever came next. We need a backup plan, Marcus said. Just in case. Daniel, if things get dangerous here, where can Sarah go that's secure? I've already arranged it, Daniel replied. There's a domestic violence shelter in Fort Collins that specializes in high-risk cases. They have security, legal support, everything Sarah would need. But Marcus, moving her there right now might be premature. It could also tip off Robert about her location through legal channels. The protective order filing is sealed, but he has connections. The more movement there is, the more likely he tracks her. So we're just supposed to sit here and wait? Elena asked, frustration creeping into her voice. For now, yes. But Marcus, I'm also arranging something else. A friend of mine from law school is now a federal prosecutor. I've briefed her on Sarah's case, specifically about Robert's threats and his apparent connections with law enforcement and judicial figures. If Robert has been falsifying medical records and using his influence to manipulate legal proceedings, that could be federal crimes. Wire fraud, corruption, potentially more. How long would that take? Marcus asked. To investigate? Weeks, maybe months. But to get protective measures in place? Could be days. The federal government doesn't like it when people corrupt their legal systems. Days we might not have, Sarah whispered. A knock on the door made everyone freeze. Charlie barked once, sharp and warning. Marcus moved to the window, peering through the curtain. A sheriff's cruiser sat in the driveway, the department logo clearly visible. It's Sheriff Brooks, Marcus said. His mind raced. This could be routine, or it could be Robert's influence already at work. Don't answer it, Sarah hissed, panic in her voice. I have to, Marcus said. Not answering would be more suspicious. Everyone stay here. Let me handle this. He opened the door to find Sheriff Brooks standing on the porch, hat in hand, expression professionally neutral. Dr. Holloway, sorry to bother you this evening. Sheriff Brooks, what can I do for you? I'm investigating a missing persons case. A woman with twin newborns, last seen in this area earlier this week. We found her abandoned vehicle at Riverside Park. You wouldn't have happened to see anyone matching that description. Marcus kept his expression neutral, years of delivering bad news to families giving him the poker face he needed. A woman with twins? No, Sheriff, I haven't seen anyone like that. Is she in danger? Her husband's concerned. Claims she's suffering from postpartum psychosis. Could be dangerous to herself or the babies. Brooks watched Marcus carefully. Reporter came through earlier asking around the neighborhood. Said she got a tip someone might have seen something. I saw that reporter, Marcus said truthfully. My wife told her we hadn't seen anything unusual. Because we haven't. Brooks nodded slowly, but his eyes swept past Marcus, taking in what he could see of the house interior. Mind if I come in? Take a quick look around, just to clear your house from our search grid. Marcus felt his heart hammering, but kept his voice calm.
Sheriff, do you have a warrant?
Brooks's eyebrows rose slightly. Should I need one, Doctor? Of course not. But it's been a long day. My daughter has school tomorrow, and I don't think it's appropriate to have law enforcement searching my home without cause. If you have reason to believe this woman is here, then yes, get a warrant. Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Brooks was the first to blink. Fair enough. But Dr. Holloway, if you do see anything suspicious, or if you learn anything about this woman's whereabouts, you call me immediately. Understood? Understood. Brooks tipped his hat and returned to his cruiser. Marcus watched until the taillights disappeared down the street before closing the door and leaning against it, his hands shaking slightly. That was close, Elena breathed. Too close, Marcus agreed. Daniel, are you still there? I heard everything. The lawyer's voice came through the speaker. Marcus Brooks was fishing. He doesn't have probable cause to search, which is why he didn't push when you challenged him. But he's suspicious. And if Robert's feeding him information, then we're running out of time. Marcus finished. Sarah was crying silently, holding both babies now. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Amy sat down beside her, putting an arm around her shoulders. Stop apologizing. You didn't do anything wrong. That horrible man did. Amy's right, Elena said firmly. We're in this together now, Sarah, all of us. We're going to figure this out. Marcus looked at his wife, his daughter, at Sarah and the babies they'd sworn to protect. Outside, night had fallen completely. Somewhere in that darkness, Robert Mitchell was planning his next move. And despite the protective order, despite the legal proceedings, Marcus knew that the real confrontation was still ahead of them. The question was, would they be ready when it came? Daniel's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Marcus, I'm driving up there. I'll be there in 90 minutes. We need to sit down and plan this out properly. If Brooks comes back with a warrant, we need to know exactly what to do." "Agreed," Marcus said. "Drive safe." After ending the call, Marcus dimmed the lights and pulled the curtains closed. They'd eat dinner quietly, keep the babies calm, and try to maintain some semblance of normalcy. But everyone in that house knew the truth. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. And before this was over, they'd all have to make choices that would define who they really were. For Marcus, that choice had already been made at 2:47 a.m. when he'd opened his door to a desperate stranger. Now he just had to be strong enough to stand by it, no matter what came next. Daniel Reeves arrived at 9:23 p.m., carrying a laptop bag and looking more disheveled than Marcus had ever seen him. His tie was loosened, his usually neat hair rumpled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he'd been working non-stop since their court hearing. "We have developments," Daniel said, as Elena ushered him inside. "Some good, some very bad." The family gathered in the dining room, far enough from the sleeping babies that their conversation wouldn't wake them. Sarah sat with her arms wrapped around herself, already bracing for bad news. Amy had been sent to her room, but was undoubtedly listening from the top of the stairs. Daniel opened his laptop and pulled up a document. First, the good news. "My contact at the U.S. Attorney's Office is interested." "Very interested. I sent her copies of those falsified medical records, and she confirmed what we suspected. They're not just manipulated, they're completely fabricated. The psychiatrist listed doesn't exist. The hospital where they were supposedly issued has no record of Sarah ever being a patient there." "That's good, right?" Elena asked. "That proves Robert's lying. It proves he's committed fraud," Daniel corrected. "Which means federal charges are possible. But here's where it gets complicated. The U.S. attorney wants to open an official investigation, but that takes time. Subpoenas, interviews, building a case. We're looking at weeks before they could move forward with charges." "We don't have weeks," Marcus said flatly. "I know. Which brings me to the bad news." Daniel pulled up another document, this one a legal filing. "Robert's attorneys filed an emergency motion this afternoon. They're challenging Judge Chen's protective order, claiming it was granted based on false testimony. They're also requesting immediate custody of the twins, arguing that Sarah is mentally unfit and has placed the children in danger by hiding them with strangers." Sarah's face went white. "He's going to take them. He's going to win." "Not necessarily," Daniel said quickly. "Judge Chen is tough. She doesn't reverse her decisions easily. But Robert's team is good. They've already scheduled a hearing for Monday morning. That gives us 4 days to prepare." 4 days, Sarah repeated numbly. 4 days before I might lose my babies forever. Marcus leaned forward. "What do we need to do?" "What evidence strengthens Sarah's case?" "Testimony from credible witnesses about her mental state when she arrived," Daniel said, looking at Marcus and Elena. "Documentation of the baby's condition. Anything that contradicts Robert's narrative that Sarah is unstable and dangerous." He paused. "There's something else. Robert's team has filed a motion to compel disclosure of Sarah's current location. They're arguing that he has a right to know where his children are." "Absolutely not," Marcus said immediately. "If he finds out she's here—" "I've already filed opposition to that motion," Daniel interrupted, arguing that disclosure would place Sarah in immediate danger. "But Marcus, you need to understand something. The longer Sarah stays here, the more risk you're taking. If Robert discovers she's in your home, he could file charges against you. Harboring a fugitive, interference with custody, potentially more." "She's not a fugitive," Elena said sharply. "She has a protective order. She has legal custody. For now," Daniel said quietly. "But if Robert's motion succeeds on Monday, that changes. And there's another problem." He pulled up a news article on his laptop. This hit the Denver News tonight. The headline read, "Desperate Father Searches for Missing Wife and Newborn Twins." Below it was a professionally shot photo of Robert looking devastated, holding what appeared to be ultrasound images. The article painted him as a loving husband whose mentally ill wife had kidnapped their children. "This is all lies," Sarah whispered, staring at the screen. "But it's effective lies," Daniel said. "Robert's controlling the narrative. He's got the media, he's got sympathetic law enforcement, and he's got resources. We need to counter that somehow." Amy appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas. "What if we tell Sarah's side? What if we go to the media too?" "Amy, you're supposed to be in bed," Elena started. "I can't sleep knowing they might take Lily and Rose away," Amy said, walking into the room. "Daniel, what if we tell the truth? Show people what Robert really is?" Daniel considered this. "It's risky. Going public could expose Sarah's location. But Amy's not wrong. Right now, only Robert's version of events is out there. If we could get Sarah's story to a trustworthy journalist—" "No," Sarah said firmly. "I won't risk it. What if Robert uses it to find me? What if going public makes things worse for the Holloways? What if it makes things better?" Amy countered. "People need to know you're not crazy, that you're not dangerous, that you're just a mom trying to protect her babies." Marcus looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. When had she become so brave? Amy makes a point, but she's also right that it's risky. "Daniel, is there a way to go public without revealing Sarah's location?" "Possibly. I know a journalist at the Colorado Tribune who specializes in domestic violence cases. She's careful, ethical, doesn't reveal sources unless legally compelled. If Sarah agreed to an interview, anonymous or with her identity protected, it could shift public perception." Sarah was shaking her head. "I don't know. I just don't know. You don't have to decide tonight," Marcus said gently. "Let's focus on preparing for Monday's hearing. What else do we need?" They spent the next 2 hours going over strategy. Daniel would need detailed statements from both Marcus and Elena about Sarah's condition and behavior since she'd arrived. Character witnesses who could testify to Sarah's fitness as a mother. Medical evidence about the baby's health and development. Around midnight, Daniel finally closed his laptop. "I should get a hotel room for the night. Be back first thing in the morning to continue prep." "Stay here," Elena offered. "We have a guest room." "It's not fancy, but it's better than a hotel," Daniel accepted gratefully. After he went upstairs, the Holloways and Sarah remained in the dining room, exhaustion settling over them like a heavy blanket. "I keep thinking about my family," Sarah said suddenly. "My parents, my brother, they probably think I'm dead. Or worse, they probably believe Robert's lies about me being mentally ill. Why don't you call them?" Marcus suggested. "Robert monitors everything. If I contact them, he'll know. He'll use it to track me. What if we helped you reach out in a way he couldn't trace?" Marcus pulled out his phone. "I could call from my number. Say I'm a doctor who treated you, that you're safe but can't talk directly. At least they'd know you're alive." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "You'd do that?" "Of course." 20 minutes later, Marcus was on the phone with a woman named Catherine Mitchell, Sarah's mother. The conversation was brief but emotional. Catherine cried, demanded to know where her daughter was, begged to see her granddaughters. Marcus explained as much as he could without compromising Sarah's safety, promising that Sarah would contact her directly as soon as it was safe. When he hung up, Sarah was sobbing. She said she knew. She said she always knew Robert was hurting me, but I kept insisting everything was fine. She said she's been waiting for me to come home for 3 years. Elena wrapped her arms around Sarah. "Then that's what you'll do. When this is over, you'll go home. You and your babies will be with people who love you. If I win on Monday," Sarah said through her tears. "You will," Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. "We'll make sure of it." But as he said it, his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. He opened it and felt his blood run cold. It was a photo of his house, taken from across the street. Taken that night. The living room lights were visible through the curtains, and in the corner of the image, barely visible, was the shadow of someone holding what looked like a baby. Below the photo was a message. "I know she's there. This ends Monday." One way or another, Marcus's hand tightened on the phone. Robert had found them, or rather, his investigator had, and now they were being watched. "Marcus?" Elena had noticed his expression. "What is it?" He showed her the phone. Elena's face went pale. Sarah saw it next and looked like she might be sick. "He knows," Sarah whispered. "He knows where we are." "Then we need to leave," Elena said immediately. "Right now. Wake Daniel, pack the babies, and get Sarah somewhere safe." But Marcus was already shaking his head. "If we run now in the middle of the night, we look guilty. We look like we're hiding something, which we are, but we can't act like it. Robert's trying to provoke us into doing something stupid. So what do we do?" Amy asked, having heard the commotion and come back downstairs. Marcus thought fast. "We call Sheriff Brooks. We report that we're being harassed and surveilled. We show him this message. Let Robert explain to law enforcement why his investigator is stalking a random family's house and sending threatening messages." "That could backfire," Sarah said. "Robert will just claim he was looking for me, and now he's found me. Brooks could force me to leave, could take the babies." "Not without a court order," Daniel said, appearing at the top of the stairs, wide awake despite having just gone to bed. "And that text message? That's evidence of harassment, possibly stalking." "Robert just made a mistake." "How is threatening us a mistake?" Elena asked. "Because he did it in writing," Daniel said, coming down the stairs. "Marcus, forward me that message immediately. This is evidence that Robert is willing to violate boundaries and make threats. It actually helps our case." Marcus forwarded the message, while Daniel fired off emails to his U.S. attorney contact and Judge Chen's clerk. Within minutes, the wheels were in motion. At 1:15 a.m., Marcus called Sheriff Brooks. The conversation was tense but necessary. Brooks agreed to send a patrol car to watch the house for the rest of the night. He also agreed to have a conversation with Robert Mitchell about appropriate conduct during a custody dispute. "He asked me point blank if Sarah was here," Marcus told the others after hanging up. "I told him I had a house guest who'd been threatened by her ex-husband, and that she had a legal protective order. I didn't confirm it was Sarah, but I didn't deny it either." "That was smart," Daniel said. "You're not lying, but you're not volunteering information either. Brooks can't force you to answer questions about a legal house guest." By 2 a.m., everyone was emotionally and physically exhausted. The babies needed feeding. Amy was falling asleep on the couch. But there was also a strange sense of relief. The secret was partially out. Robert knew where Sarah was, which meant they didn't have to hide anymore. They could focus on the legal battle ahead. Sarah sat in the rocking chair, feeding Rose, while Lily slept in her bassinet. "I never imagined it would come to this," she said quietly. "When I knocked on your door 3 days ago, I just wanted a warm place to rest for a few hours. Maybe some formula for the babies. I never meant to drag you into a war. Wars aren't won by people who run away," Amy said, fighting sleep. "They're won by people who stand and fight." Marcus smiled at his daughter. "When did you become so wise?" "I have good teachers." Elena kissed Amy's forehead. "Bed now, school in the morning, but no buts. You can't help if you're exhausted. Get some sleep. We'll all need our strength for what comes next." Reluctantly, Amy headed upstairs. Elena followed to tuck her in, leaving Marcus, Daniel, and Sarah in the living room. "What are our realistic chances on Monday?" Marcus asked Daniel quietly. Daniel didn't sugarcoat it. 50-50. Judge Chen is fair, but Robert's team will come prepared. They'll have expert witnesses, character testimonials, probably even sympathetic law enforcement reports. We need to be just as prepared. What if we lose? Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. Then we appeal, Daniel said immediately. And we keep fighting. Sarah, custody cases can take months, sometimes years. Monday isn't the end. It's just the beginning. I don't know if I can survive months of this, Sarah admitted. Not knowing if my babies will be taken. Waiting for the next legal motion. Looking over my shoulder every day. Marcus sat down beside her. You're stronger than you think. You proved that when you escaped. When you gave birth alone. When you walked 2 miles in freezing weather to find help. You've already survived the impossible. This is just one more thing to get through. Sarah looked down at Rose, who'd fallen asleep mid-feeding. They deserve better than this. Better than a mother who's constantly afraid. Better than being caught in the middle of their parents' war. They deserve you, Marcus said firmly. Their real mother. The one who protected them from a dangerous man. The one who fought for them when it would have been easier to give up. That's what they deserve, Sarah, and that's what we're going to make sure they get. Outside, a police cruiser sat parked across the street, its presence both comforting and unsettling. Somewhere in the darkness, Robert Mitchell's investigator was watching, waiting, reporting back. And in Denver, Robert was undoubtedly planning his next move. But inside the Holloway house, a makeshift family had formed. Bound not by blood but by choice. By the decision to do what was right even when it was hard. By the commitment to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Monday's hearing would determine Sarah's legal rights. But the real battle, the one being fought in this living room at 2 a.m., was already won. They weren't giving up, no matter what came next. Friday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine and a development that changed everything. Marcus was making breakfast when his phone rang with a Denver area code he didn't recognize. He almost let it go to voicemail, but something made him answer. Dr. Holloway, this is Jennifer Torres from the Colorado Tribune. I understand you're providing shelter to Sarah Mitchell. I'd like to speak with her. Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. I don't know what you're talking about. Dr. Holloway, please. I'm not working with Robert Mitchell. Actually, I'm calling because I think his entire story is fabricated, and I want to help expose the truth. But I need Sarah's cooperation. Marcus walked into his study and closed the door. How did you get my number? I have sources in law enforcement who are concerned about this case. They've seen Robert Mitchell's type before, wealthy men who manipulate the system. When Sheriff Brooks reported being pressured to investigate your home, despite having no probable cause, my source reached out. Jennifer paused. I know Sarah's there, Dr. Holloway, and I know she's terrified. But staying silent is playing into Robert's hands. He's controlling the narrative because he's the only one talking. If Sarah speaks publicly, Robert will use it against her. He'll say she's seeking attention, that she's unstable, which is why I want to do this carefully, Jennifer interrupted. Not a television interview. A written piece where Sarah can tell her story in her own words, with corroborating evidence. I've covered domestic violence cases for 15 years. I know how to protect sources while exposing abusers. Marcus hesitated. I need to talk to Sarah and her lawyer. Of course. But Dr. Holloway, time matters. Robert's version of events is spreading. Every hour Sarah stays silent, more people believe his lies. Call me back when you've discussed it. After she hung up, Marcus stood in his study for a long moment, thinking. Then he gathered everyone in the living room. Sarah, Elena, Daniel, and even Amy, who'd stayed home from school claiming a stomachache that they all knew was really anxiety about the situation. A reporter just called, Marcus said, and explained Jennifer Torres's offer. Sarah's first reaction was immediate refusal. No, absolutely not. It's too dangerous, but Daniel was nodding slowly. I know Jennifer Torres. She's legitimate. She broke the story about that judge in Boulder who was taking bribes from developers. She's fearless and she protects her sources. But Robert will know it's me, Sarah protested. There's no one else who could tell my story. He already knows you're here, Amy pointed out. He sent that creepy message last night. What difference does it make if everyone else knows too? Amy has a point, Elena said. Right now you're hiding while Robert plays the victim. Maybe it's time people heard the truth. What would I even say? Sarah asked, her voice shaking. How do I explain 3 years of abuse in a way that makes people understand? They'll think I'm exaggerating, or that I should have left sooner, or that I somehow deserved it. You say exactly what happened, Daniel said firmly, and we back it up with evidence. The falsified medical records, photos of your injuries, testimony from Dr. Holloway about your condition when you arrived. We make it impossible to dismiss you as a crazy ex-wife. Sarah looked down at Lily, sleeping in her arms. What if it backfires? What if it makes things worse? What if it makes things better? Marcus countered gently. Sarah, You've been running and hiding for so long. Maybe it's time to stand in the light and let people see who you really are." For several long minutes, Sarah sat in silence, clearly wrestling with the decision. Finally, she looked up at Daniel. "If I do this, if I tell my story, you really think it could help our case on Monday?" "I think it could change everything," Daniel said. "Public opinion matters even in courtrooms. If people rally around you, if there's outcry about Robert's behavior, judges pay attention. Not because they're swayed by media, but because they want to be on the right side of justice." Sarah closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and nodded. "Okay, let's do it." Jennifer Torres arrived at the Holloway house at noon, carrying a laptop and a digital recorder. She was in her 40s, with kind eyes and a professional demeanor that immediately put Sarah at ease. They settled in Marcus's study for privacy, while the rest of the family tried to maintain normal activities in the rest of the house. "Before we start," Jennifer said, "I want you to understand how this works. I'll record our conversation and take notes. When I write the article, I'll use your words, but I'll also verify everything independently. I won't publish anything that could endanger you or your children. And if at any point you want to stop, we stop. Clear?" Sarah nodded. "Clear. Tell me your story." "Start wherever feels right." Sarah began with how she met Robert at that charity gala 5 years ago. How charming he'd been, how generous and attentive. How quickly their relationship had progressed from dating to engagement to marriage. Jennifer listened without interrupting, taking notes, but mostly just letting Sarah talk. Then Sarah described when things changed. The subtle criticisms that grew less subtle. The isolation from friends and family, so gradual she hadn't noticed until it was complete. The first time Robert had shoved her during an argument. His immediate apology and promise it would never happen again. The lies they'd both told themselves. The progression from emotional abuse to physical violence. The broken ribs, the burn marks. The threats that grew more specific and terrifying. Robert's obsession with having a son. His rage when the ultrasound revealed twin girls. His plan to take the babies and make Sarah disappear. Sarah showed Jennifer the fake medical records, explaining how Robert had used them as insurance, a threat hanging over her head. She described giving birth in that gas station bathroom with only a stranger's help. The 2 days of driving with no plan, except to get as far away as possible. And finally, she described showing up at the Holloway house, half frozen and desperate, expecting to be turned away, but instead finding people who chose to help at great risk to themselves. By the time Sarah finished, 3 hours had passed. Jennifer had filled half a notebook with notes, and the digital recorder had captured every word. The journalist's eyes were red, though she'd clearly been trying not to cry. "Thank you for trusting me with this," Jennifer said quietly. "I know how hard it was to relive all of that." "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Now I verify everything. I'll contact the hospital where those fake records supposedly came from. I'll try to reach the psychiatrist Robert claims treated you. I'll document that none of it is real. I'll also speak with domestic violence experts about the patterns you've described. By the time this article runs, it won't just be your word against his. It'll be your word backed by irrefutable evidence. When will it be published?" "Tomorrow morning. Online tonight if you approve the final draft." Jennifer packed up her equipment. "Sarah, I've covered a lot of these cases. I've seen a lot of survivors. And I want you to know that what you did, escaping with those babies, was incredibly brave. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." After Jennifer left, Sarah felt simultaneously lighter and more terrified. She told her story, put it out there for the world to judge. There was no taking it back now. That evening, Jennifer emailed the draft article. The entire household gathered around Marcus's laptop to read it. The headline read, "The real story behind the missing mother, how one woman fled for her life." The article was powerful, detailed and devastating. Jennifer had verified the falsified records, confirming that the psychiatrist didn't exist and the hospital had no record of Sarah. She'd included expert commentary about domestic violence patterns and why victims often can't just leave. She'd quoted extensively from Sarah's testimony, while also incorporating independent verification of key facts. Most importantly, she'd ended with a direct challenge to Robert, asking why a concerned father would fabricate medical records, why he'd never reported his wife's supposed mental illness to authorities until after she fled, and why his story only emerged after Sarah had already escaped with their daughters. "It's perfect," Daniel said, reading over Marcus's shoulder. "She absolutely nailed him. But will it be enough?" Sarah asked. "We'll find out tomorrow," Daniel replied. The article went live at 8 p.m. Within an hour, it had been shared thousands of times on social media. By 10 p.m., it was trending on Colorado news sites. Other reporters were picking up the story, requesting interviews with Sarah, with Daniel, even with the Holloways. Marcus's phone started ringing constantly. Elena's too. They ignored most of the calls, but Daniel fielded several from journalists wanting comment. His message was consistent. Sarah Mitchell was a domestic violence survivor, exercising her legal right to protect herself and her children. Any questions about Robert Mitchell's behavior should be directed to him and his lawyers. At midnight, Marcus was about to turn off his phone when Sheriff Brooks called. "Dr. Holloway," Brooks said without greeting.
I just read that article.
And I owe you an apology. I let myself be manipulated by a smooth talker with money and connections. I should have listened to my gut." He paused. "I've withdrawn my deputies from this case. As far as I'm concerned, Sarah Mitchell has every right to be wherever she feels safe. And I've made it very clear to Mr. Mitchell that if his investigator continues surveilling your property, I'll arrest him for stalking." Marcus felt relief wash over him. "Thank you, Sheriff. Don't thank me yet. The state police might still get involved, and Robert Mitchell isn't going to take this lying down. But at least you won't have local law enforcement breathing down your neck." Brooks hesitated. "For what it's worth, you did the right thing helping her. I hope I would have done the same." After hanging up, Marcus found Sarah sitting in the darkened living room, both babies asleep in their bassinets beside her. She was reading comments on the article, tears streaming down her face. "Sarah, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "These comments, Marcus. People believe me. They're calling Robert a monster. They're saying I'm brave." She looked up at him. "For 3 years, he made me think I was worthless, that no one would believe me, that I deserved what he did. And now thousands of strangers are telling me I was right to leave, that I'm strong, that my babies are lucky to have me." Marcus sat down beside her. "Because all of that is true." "There are angry comments too," Sarah admitted. "People saying I should have left sooner. People defending Robert. But Marcus, for every negative comment, there are 10 positive ones. 10 people who understand, who've been where I was, who are telling their own stories in the comments. That's the power of truth," Marcus said. "It resonates. It connects. It makes people remember that behind every statistic about domestic violence is a real person fighting for their life." Sarah wiped her eyes. "I'm still terrified about Monday, about what Robert will do. But at least now I'm not fighting alone in the dark. The whole world is watching, which means he has to be careful," Marcus said. "He can't intimidate judges or manipulate law enforcement as easily when everyone's paying attention." They sat together in the quiet house, listening to the babies breathe, watching the glow of the laptop screen displaying hundreds of supportive comments from strangers who'd become unexpected allies. Upstairs, Amy was also reading the comments, her young heart full of righteous anger at what Sarah had endured and fierce pride that her family had helped. She screenshot particularly moving comments to show Sarah in the morning, wanting her to know just how many people were on her side. Elena sat on the edge of their bed, finally allowing herself to cry. The emotional toll of the past few days was catching up to her. The fear, the uncertainty, the constant vigilance, but also the satisfaction of knowing they'd made a difference, that their choice to help had potentially saved 3 lives. Daniel was in the guest room, preparing for Monday's hearing with renewed confidence. The article had shifted the landscape entirely. Robert would still fight, would still bring his expensive lawyers and fabricated evidence. But now he'd be doing it under scrutiny, with the public watching, with his lies already exposed. And in a Denver hotel room, Robert Mitchell sat in front of his laptop, reading the same article with mounting fury. His carefully constructed narrative had been demolished in a few thousand words. His reputation was being shredded in real time on social media. His lawyers were calling, warning him that the fabricated medical records were now a serious problem that could lead to criminal charges. He'd underestimated Sarah, underestimated the doctor who'd taken her in, underestimated the power of one woman's truth told to the right audience at the right time. But Robert Mitchell hadn't built his empire by accepting defeat. If Sarah wanted a public battle, he'd give her one. And he'd make sure that by the time Monday's hearing arrived, she'd regret ever speaking out. He picked up his phone and dialed his lead attorney. "We need to talk about our strategy. Sarah just declared war. It's time we reminded her what happens to people who challenge me." The article had changed the game. But the battle was far from over, and both sides knew that Monday's hearing would determine not just custody of two innocent babies, but whether truth and justice could triumph over money and manipulation. The Holloway house settled into sleep around 2 a.m., exhausted but hopeful. Outside, the police cruiser remained parked, a silent guardian. The street was quiet, the neighborhood peaceful. But in the silence, the countdown to Monday continued. 48 hours until everything would be decided. 48 hours to prepare for the fight of their lives, and somewhere in the darkness, both sides were preparing their final moves in a battle that neither could afford to lose. Monday morning dawned cold and clear. Marcus stood in his driveway at 6 a.m., watching the sun rise over Everett Springs, knowing that by sunset everything would be different. For better or worse, today would determine Sarah's future and the fate of Lily and Rose. Inside, the house hummed with nervous energy. Elena helped Sarah dress in borrowed professional clothes, a navy blazer and slacks that Amy had insisted they buy Saturday afternoon. "You need to look strong," Amy had said, "like someone who has her life together." Daniel arrived at 7 with coffee and final instructions. "Judge Chen starts promptly at 9. Robert's team will present first. They'll try to paint Sarah as unstable, dangerous, unfit. Let them. We go second and dismantle every lie with facts. What if the article backfires?" Sarah asked, her hands trembling as she held her coffee. "What if the judge thinks I was trying to manipulate public opinion? Then we explain that you were telling the truth after Robert spent days lying to the media," Daniel said calmly. "Sarah, you have something Robert doesn't. You have credibility. You have evidence. And you have witnesses who saw you at your most vulnerable and can testify that you were protecting your children, not endangering them." The drive to Denver felt both endless and too short. Marcus drove while Elena sat in back with Sarah, holding her hand. Daniel followed in his own car, already on the phone with his U.S. attorney contact, confirming that federal charges against Robert were imminent. The courthouse was surrounded by news vans. Jennifer Torres's article had ignited a firestorm, and every media outlet wanted coverage of the hearing. Domestic violence advocacy groups had organized a rally outside, dozens of supporters holding signs that read, "We believe Sarah and protect survivors, not abusers." Sarah stared at the crowd through the car window, tears sliding down her face. "I never imagined people would care." "That's what he wanted you to believe," Marcus said quietly. "That you were alone, that no one would help." He was wrong. Inside the courthouse, they were directed to a secure courtroom reserved for sensitive family cases. Robert was already there with his legal team. 3 lawyers in expensive suits, radiating confidence. When Robert saw Sarah, his expression flickered just for a moment, revealing rage before the concerned husband mask slid back into place. Judge Chen entered precisely at 9, her expression giving nothing away. "We're here for an emergency motion regarding custody of minor children, Lily and Rose Mitchell. Mr. Brennan, you're representing the petitioner?" Robert's lead attorney stood. Yes, Your Honor, we're seeking immediate custody based on evidence that Ms. Mitchell is mentally unstable and has endangered the children by hiding them with strangers. What followed was 90 minutes of legal warfare. Robert's team presented their case with precision, calling a psychiatrist who'd never met Sarah but testified about postpartum psychosis. They showed the fake medical records, still trying to pass them off as legitimate until Daniel objected and Judge Chen demanded verification. When the hospital confirmed they were forgeries, the courtroom went silent. Robert's lead attorney stumbled, trying to explain, but the damage was done. Then it was Daniel's turn. He called Marcus first, who testified about Sarah's condition when she arrived, hypothermic, terrified, but clearly lucid and focused solely on protecting her babies. Elena testified next, describing how Sarah had cared for the twins with competence and love, showing no signs of mental illness or instability. Finally, Daniel played his ace. Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence that Mr. Mitchell has been under investigation by the U.S. Attorney's Office for fraud and intimidation. The falsified medical records weren't just lies told in a custody dispute. They were criminal acts designed to trap and control his wife. Robert's lawyers erupted in objections, but Judge Chen silenced them with a look. I'll allow it. Daniel presented emails between Robert and the private investigator discussing tactics to intimidate Sarah and the Holloways. Text messages where Robert explicitly stated he'd make Sarah disappear after the babies were born. Financial records showing payments to individuals for creating false documentation. The evidence was devastating. With each document, Robert's mask cracked further until he was gripping the table, his knuckles white, his jaw clenched. Judge Chen reviewed everything in silence. The courtroom held its breath. Finally, she looked up. I'm denying the motion for custody change. Furthermore, I'm modifying the protective order to include a 1,000-foot distance requirement and mandatory anger management counseling for Mr. Mitchell. She fixed Robert with a stern gaze. Sir, you fabricated evidence, intimidated witnesses, and used your resources to abuse the legal system. I'm forwarding this entire case file to the U.S. Attorney for criminal review. You're fortunate I'm not holding you in contempt right now. Sarah collapsed into Daniel's arms, sobbing. Marcus felt Elena grab his hand, squeezing tight. In the gallery, Amy, who'd skipped school to attend, was crying and smiling simultaneously. Robert stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly. This isn't over, he said, his voice cold. Yes, Mr. Mitchell, Judge Chen said firmly. It is. And if you continue to harass or threaten Ms. Mitchell or anyone helping her, I will personally ensure you face every legal consequence available.
Are we clear?
Robert's lawyers pulled him toward the exit before he could respond. As he passed Sarah, he leaned close and whispered something. Sarah flinched but didn't look away. Outside the courtroom, they were mobbed by reporters. Daniel handled questions while Marcus and Elena ushered Sarah to the car. The rally supporters cheered when they emerged, chanting Sarah's name. 3 months later, Sarah sat in the Holloway living room, now decorated with photos of Lily and Rose's first smiles, first bath, first everything. The babies had grown, healthy and happy. Completely unaware of the battle fought for their safety, Robert faced federal charges and had been ordered to complete supervised therapy before any visitation could be considered. His business reputation was destroyed, and most of his powerful friends had quietly distanced themselves. Sarah had reconnected with her family. Her mother visited weekly, making up for lost time. Her brother had driven from Wyoming to meet his nieces and apologized for not fighting harder to stay in contact. I've been thinking about what happens next, Sarah said, watching Marcus play with Rose on the floor. I can't stay here forever. You can stay as long as you need, Elena said firmly. I know, but I want to do something with this experience. Jennifer Torres connected me with a domestic violence organization. They want me to speak to other survivors, help them understand they can escape. That's wonderful, Marcus said. I'm scared, Sarah admitted. But I'm also tired of being scared. Robert took 3 years of my life. I'm not giving him one more day. Amy bounded in from school, dropping her backpack to scoop up Lily. Guess what? My social studies teacher asked me to do a presentation on the importance of helping others. I'm going to talk about what our family did. Is that okay? Sarah smiled. That's perfect. That evening, as Sarah rocked her daughters to sleep, she thought about the Marcus who'd opened his door that frozen night. She thought about his next words, the ones that had saved 3 lives. Come inside. You're safe here. Those 6 words had changed everything. They'd given her hope when she had none, shelter when she was desperate, a family when she was alone. Outside, the world continued spinning. But inside the Holloway house, 3 lives saved were now 3 lives thriving. And the doctor who'd chosen compassion over caution could sleep peacefully, knowing he'd made exactly the right choice. The story that began with a desperate knock on a stranger's door had become something beautiful, a testament to courage, kindness, and the extraordinary things that happen when ordinary people choose to help. And somewhere in the darkness of that first night, when Marcus had said those life-saving words, the universe had shifted just slightly toward justice. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.